You wouldn't survive a day in Subura, not because you're weak, but because it was built to break people. No clean water, no privacy, no silence, flammable buildings, collapsing stairwells, open sewage in the street. If you didn't starve, you'd burn. If you didn't burn, you'd be robbed, or crushed, or disappear, and no one would notice. This was ancient Rome's dirtiest, most dangerous district, home to half the city's poor, forgotten by law and feared even by the elite. Insulae towering 7 stories with no fire exits, streets so narrow the sun couldn't reach them. Every breath carried smoke, disease, or the stench of human waste, and every window was a threat, because people dumped their filth on your head without warning. Subura wasn't a flaw in the empire. It was the empire, stripped of marble, stripped of power, stripped of mercy. And if you really want to understand Rome, this is where you have to start. In the part of the city where survival was a privilege, not a right. The Subura was Rome at its most raw, a festering tangle of humanity packed into crumbling buildings, twisted alleys, and unspoken hierarchies. It wasn't the Rome of triumphal arches or marble courts. It was the Rome of runoff, of soot, of hunger, and it housed the people who made the empire run. Wedged between the Esquiline and Viminal hills, the Subura sat in a basin that trapped heat, smoke, and smell. Its streets were narrow, so narrow that sunlight barely touched the ground. The structures leaned precariously toward one another. The insulae, or tenement blocks, towering 5 to 7 stories above the ground. Most were made of timber and clay, built quickly and cheaply to house Rome's ever-growing poor. These buildings burned often, collapsed regularly, and were rarely repaired. From dawn until dusk the district throbbed with noise and movement. Merchants hawked watered wine and stale bread. Butchers carved meat that had spent too long in the sun. Children darted barefoot between passing carts, shouting over each other in a mess of Latin, Greek, and curse words that barely qualified as either. The Subura was known, even in its own time, as a place of noise, chaos, and danger. It was a neighbourhood the emperors tried to ignore, but could never afford to. It produced labourers, artisans, prostitutes, and criminals, all necessary, all disposable. The city's elite would never live here, but they depended on those who did. Augustus himself had ordered the construction of a literal wall to divide the Subura from his own forum, not just as a physical barrier, but as a political one. The contrast was intentional. The marble colonnades of the imperial centre gleamed just beyond the ridge, while on the other side the slums stewed. Despite its reputation, the Subura was vital to Rome. It was home to collegia, officially trade guilds, unofficially gangs, that organised labour, enforced loyalty, and controlled entire blocks of the district. These collegia played a key role in elections, urban festivals, and neighbourhood defence. They could rally hundreds of supporters for a political candidate or provoke riots over bread shortages. Senators paid well for their favour. Rivalries between them often turned violent. By midday, the Subura choked on its own heat. Open sewers ran along the edges of the street. With no formal sanitation system in the area, most residents emptied chamber pots directly into the gutters or out of windows. Pedestrians moved carefully, heads tilted slightly upward, always watching for what might fall from above. Urine, feces, spoiled food, broken pots. The city fell in pieces, one insult at a time. Public fountains provided water, though few dared trust its clarity. Grain was distributed at intervals, a function of the emperor's welfare program, the Annona, but supplies were inconsistent. Fights broke out frequently. In dry seasons, tempers frayed like threadbare tunics. The inhabitants were primarily poor freemen, slaves, freedmen, immigrants, and the newly arrived rural class, peasants who had abandoned crumbling farms for a chance at survival in the capital. Entire families crammed into single rented rooms. Privacy was non-existent. Disease spread quickly. Infant mortality was high. Yet amid the filth and the danger, commerce flourished. Tabernae, street-level shops, bustled with activity. Popinae served meals to men who lived day to day. These taverns doubled as gambling halls and unofficial brothels. Licensed lupanaria also dotted the district, with red lamps over doorways and vulgar graffiti on their walls. Prostitution was legal and taxed. Many women were enslaved, others worked for themselves, paying rents to a landlord or protection fees to a gang. Between shops stood the Fulonicae, Roman laundries. These reeked of ammonia, as urine collected from public jars was used to bleach tunics. Launderers stomped fabrics with their bare feet. Many went blind or developed chronic illnesses. It was dangerous, low-paid work, but it was work one could find temples too, not grand, not pristine, but present. Shrines to household gods and Eastern cults squeezed between tenements. Religion in Subura was practical. Sacrifices were small, prayers whispered, usually in exchange for protection, food, or luck in dice games. Crime was endemic. Theft, extortion, assault, all common. The city's police, the cohortes urbanae, patrolled sporadically. The vigile, originally firefighters, functioned more as neighbourhood watch. Their loyalty could often be purchased. It was in this environment that the Great Fire of 64 CE ignited. Though historians debate its cause, most agree the blaze began somewhere near the Subura. Wind funneled the flames through the district's dense wooden structures. With no organised firefighting in these alleys, the fire spread quickly. It consumed the Subura, then jumped to the Forum, then beyond. 10 of Rome's 14 districts were damaged or destroyed. Nero, emperor at the time, blamed the Christians, but many whispered that Subura had been a matchbox waiting for a spark. The fire was not the last. Subura burned again and again, and still people returned. Rents were lower after a collapse, rooms available. The city rebuilt or didn't. Life carried on, because it had to. By sunset the district changed again. The day's vendors disappeared. Shadows lengthened. Lamps lit with olive oil flickered in windows. Night belonged to the desperate, the drunk, the predatory. Roof tiles slipped, muffled cries echoed, dogs howled. Somewhere in the dark a brawl turned fatal. Someone would find the body in the morning, or not. Those who lived in Subura slept lightly, if they slept at all. For the empire, the Subura was a contradiction, essential but neglected, feared but relied upon. It was a place of work, vice, worship, and death. For the rich it was a cautionary tale, for the poor it was home. And for modern historians it's a reminder. Rome was never just the marble. It was the dirt between the stones,